Everybody. In my last video, I talked about how to prepare for the investigation, how to conduct yourself during the investigation, and what to do after the investigation. But what I want to talk to you about today is that not all paranormal investigations use the same technique. The way you may investigate a cemetery will be different than the way you investigate a abandoned prison or an asylum or a haunted house. And I want to make you aware of these things because a lot of it came from my own personal experience, and some of it came from what I've read, as I'll mention later. In fact, I'll tell it to you now. One of the examples that I will give is that I went to a historic house that is said to have ghosts in it. And the house was used during the Revolutionary War. And at that point, we were the only one there. I was with some other people, and we were the only ones there. So the curator let us conduct a paranormal investigation. We was allowed to use our spirit box. We had the volume up, and the spirit box was loud. I think myself and one other person had a spirit box, and it was loud. So unbeknownst to us, other people came in. And they heard the spirit box. Well, they heard the noise, the white noise. And it made them uncomfortable. So the curator came and told us that we had to stop what we were doing. And we ended up leaving. Well, it wasn't until a while later when I picked up Troy Taylor's book that I realized that we really didn't have to leave. What we could have easily have done was just use our digital recorder, ask questions, wait till we got answers or see if we got answers. And then we could have just kept on doing the investigation. No harm done. So I learned that lesson, that you don't need to use a spirit box at every investigation. My advice would be, if you want to hear the response in real time as you're doing the investigation, that's good. You could use the spirit box then. If you're outside, use the spirit box. Recently, I went to a cemetery and I went to visit someone. And it was impromptu. I had no intentions of doing it, but I said, you know what? Let me do an EVP session. So I used my cell phone voice recorder to do it. It got good sound. I mean, it works well. And this is one of the things that I tell you, that a lot of people think that they got to get all these fancy equipments, that basically they can use their cell phone for a lot of the stuff. Use the cell phone for an EVP session. Use your camera phone for the pictures. They work just as well. I've had success with both. But at this point in time, it just seemed that all the airplanes was flying over while I was doing this session. So all you heard was airplanes going back and forth. You barely heard me. And I was close to the phone speaking. And I was speaking loud like I am to you now. And couldn't hear anything. So in that kind of instance, I would use a spirit box with a good speaker so you could hear it. And you could just put your digital recorder or your cell phone next to the spirit box, and it will pick up whatever response that is coming through the speaker. Another thing that I would like to tell you, and it's very interesting, I had this experience happen as well. You could stand next to someone. Both of you have your digital recorders out, recording. One of you will ask a question, and it'll be heard on both recorders, mind you. One of you could ask a question, and you will get two distinct different answers. Okay? You might even get two voices. I had this happen to me when I did an outside investigation at Grant's tomb. I was with someone and we held an EVP session, and we asked one question, got two answers. When you go through that, ask to be a little bit more specific. Try to ask more questions about it, so this way you know which answer is what. You don't want to ask how many are you and someone goes 2 and then you hear another voice say 15. It could be legit because spirits occupy more than one space. You could have, a spirit from different time periods in one area, one location. And sometimes spirits are aware of other spirits and sometimes they're not. So there's a spirit from the 1700 giving you the answer that they know. There's one other person here. There's 2 people here. But then you have a spirit from the 1800 that when they died, there might have been 15 people. So that spirit will say 15, But you want to, if your question is something like, say you went to Grant's tomb and you go, how do you feel about what General Burnside did? You want to get a specific answer. You don't want to get an ambiguous answer like, he was great, he was bad. You want to know who's who because you're asking General Grant this question. I have a friend. He investigates all over the country, prisons, hospitals, asylums. And his equipment, it looks like he's packing for a vacation. He has all these different types of lighting, cameras, EMF detectors, REM pods. All this stuff. But that's conducive to what he's doing because he's going to places that is dark, that definitely has no lighting, it's very poorly lit. You want to make sure you get to hear every little sound that's there. You don't want to miss anything. And that's totally different than what you and I may do starting out as paranormal investigators, where we just basically go to a haunted house, cemetery, a haunted location. In my case, since I live in New York City, be Wall Street. Very, very haunted location. Many of you know 9/11. I've never investigated Ground Zero, but there are spirits that have traveled from Ground Zero to other areas. They're lost, unfortunately. And I hope one day a bunch of us could get together and help these spirits move on. But those are 2 examples that I've gone through. The EVP session at the house and the fact that when I did an outside EVP at Grant's tomb, asked the question and got 2 different answers. These things happen. That's why I suggested Troy Taylor's book in a previous video, because it covers certain things. It covers the equipment. It covers how to do investigations, about logging in your investigation, the day, the date, the time, whether the moon is out, what temperature it is, whether it's humid, because all these things affect the investigation. It's not just a matter of whipping stuff out and snapping pictures and asking questions, hoping you're getting answers. Some people use dowsing rods to communicate with spirits. If it's a yes, it crosses. If it's a no, it separates. That's another technique that is used. I've heard of some people using the pendulums, but I've heard good and bad things about that, So I'd research it before I employ something like that. I've heard people use scrying, or what they do, I think, is and I think this is generally something that is done with what is termed left-handed people. I'm not talking about whether you use your right hand or left hand to write. I'm talking about in terms of good or bad. Those who are into the occult and Satanism and stuff like that, they are often referred to as left-handed people. And I think what a lot of them do when they want to communicate with the spirit is they make a circle and they paint it black. And they actually stare into it. And supposing when you say something and you stare into it, you're supposed to see images. Same thing that is done with a mirror. That's another technique that I guess some people would use to communicate with spirits. I guess that's another way of doing an investigation. Stare to a mirror and see if the spirit of who you're talking to comes out. But I think I've touched on enough. I think I've said enough. So if you enjoyed this video or any of the other videos, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Share your comments, good or bad, because I learn from both. And until the next video, I think it will be about the dangers of paranormal investigations, because there are some, and some of the things that can happen. So I think I'll do it on that. But until then, have a blessed day. Love, light, and peace to you all. Goodbye.